What if I told you the moment he finally reaches out will be the moment you say nothing at all? You're about to hear from him, but not because you chased, begged, or tried harder. It's because your silence did what your words couldn't. You see, silence creates mystery. It shifts the energy. It pulls you out of the predictable pattern where you're always the one reaching, fixing, holding it together. And suddenly he starts to wonder, where did she go? That curiosity, that confusion, that subtle panic. It all starts the second you stop trying to be heard and start letting your absence speak. Because your silence isn't empty, it's powerful. It's the loudest expression of self-respect. It tells the truth without saying a word. And when you remove your attention, your energy, your presence, his mind wakes up. He starts noticing your effort in hindsight. He replays your last conversation. He wonders if he messed up. And here's the secret. He's not coming back because you convinced him. He's coming back because you didn't. If you've ever been the one over-explaining, over-giving, or overstaying, this message is for you. Because this time, silence is what changes everything. You know what's interesting? Most people think that silence is just the absence of communication. But in dating, silence is communication. And sometimes it's the most powerful message you'll ever send. Because here's the truth. When you go quiet, after showing genuine interest, after being warm, present, engaged, and then you pull back, even slightly, you shift something, not just in them, but in the dynamic. That silence isn't empty. It's full of energy. And that energy creates mystery. Mystery is what wakes people up. When someone knows everything about you, when they always know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, where they stand with you, they don't have to wonder. And when they don't have to wonder, they don't have to work. Mystery creates curiosity. And curiosity is a form of emotional investment. If you're constantly available, always replying within seconds, always initiating conversation, there's no room for that person to miss you because you never left. You're there before they even get a chance to look around. It's like watching a movie and already knowing the ending. There's no suspense, no build, no tension. And without tension, there's no value. People fall in love, not just from what they feel with you, but also from what they feel when you're not there. That contrast is crucial. And this isn't about being cold or distant. It's about not flooding the space. When you show your interest clearly and then step back, you allow someone the chance to step forward. And if they're really into you, they will. If they've been coasting, they'll start to lean in. And if they don't feel anything, well, your silence just saved you from months of over-investing in someone who was never going to meet you halfway. Silence reveals truth, but the key is how you do it, because silence works only when it follows genuine presence. If you've been closed off the whole time, your silence isn't intriguing, it's just disconnection. But if you've laughed with them, opened up, shown warmth, made them feel good, and then you suddenly become a little less available, they notice. They wonder, did something change? Did I do something? Why haven't they messaged? And that's the moment curiosity kicks in. Let's be honest, we live in a world of constant stimulation. Everyone's glued to their phones, checking messages, replying instantly. So when you don't respond right away, not out of pettiness, but because you're busy, focused, living your life, it's different, and different stands out. We've all had that moment when someone texts us back hours later and we suddenly feel like we care more than we thought. Why? Because now they're the unpredictable one. Now they have the mystery. You want to know if someone's genuinely interested? Give them a little space, step back, and let them choose to step forward. People don't appreciate things that are constantly in their face. They appreciate what they almost lost. That little bit of silence makes them think about you, wonder about you, replay the last conversation you had. It builds emotional tension, and emotional tension is what draws people in. It's not about manipulation. It's not about pretending to be too busy or playing hard to get. It's about showing that your world doesn't stop because they're in it, that you're someone who has a full life, that you're not trying to force a connection, you're simply letting it breathe. Because when you let things breathe, you give them space to grow. The irony is, the less you chase someone, the more room you give them to choose you. And when someone chooses you without pressure, without prompting, without being pursued, that's when you know it's real. They reach out, not because you nudged them, but because they felt something in your absence. That's the beauty of silence. It doesn't just create mystery, it creates momentum. And the next time you hear from them, whether it's a call, a message, or a moment where they open up in a new way, you'll know that silence did that. That shift you were waiting for. It wasn't your words that made it happen. It was your decision to stop speaking, to stop giving, to stop over-explaining. You gave them the gift of wondering, and in that space, they remembered what it felt like to have your energy around and what it felt like to be without it. And that's when they reach out. That's when you hear from them. Silence did that. There's this moment, and it happens to all of us, where you've sent the message, you've put in the effort, you've been available, responsive, kind, and then nothing. Silence from them. And you start thinking, should I double text? Should I send something funny? Maybe they missed it. Maybe they're just busy. But deep down, you know what you're really doing. You're trying to keep the connection alive when the other person has stopped nurturing it. And this is where silence becomes your superpower. You see, not responding doesn't make you cold. It doesn't mean you're being petty or trying to manipulate anyone. What it actually means is this. I see that the energy isn't being matched, and I respect myself enough to stop pouring when my cup is being drained. Silence isn't you losing. It's you winning. Not because you're walking away from the person, but because you're walking toward your value. Your silence is communication. It says, I'm not available for one-sided effort. And believe me, people hear it. When you pull your energy back, when you stop texting just to make sure they don't forget you, when you stop liking every post or reacting to every story, you make them feel something they didn't expect. Your absence, and here's the truth, your absence is powerful. It gives someone a contrast they didn't have before. When you're always present, always reaching out, they never get to feel what it's like to miss you. Silence gives them that experience. Now that's where most people get scared, because silence also creates uncertainty. It makes you wonder, what if they move on? What if I never hear from them again? And sure, maybe that happens, but what you're really afraid of isn't losing them. It's confronting that maybe you are holding something together on your own. But let's flip that. Imagine someone realizes that the energy you gave wasn't guaranteed, that your presence was a choice, that your effort, your attention, your messages, they were a gift. And now it's quiet. They can scroll their phone and not see your name light up. They can open their messages and feel the emptiness where your presence used to be. And if there was even a spark of interest there, silence will reignite it faster than any witty text ever could. Because here's what people remember. They remember how you made them feel, but they also remember when you stopped showing up. And that moment of, wait, where did they go? That's when they start to lean in. But you don't stay silent to get them back. That's not the point. You stay silent because you're listening now, not with your ears, with your standards. You're no longer trying to fill the silence. You're letting the silence do its job. You're letting it reveal their intentions, their effort, their desire, or the lack of it. It's in the silence where their true behavior emerges. Do they reach out? Do they try to reconnect? Or do they let you fade quietly, confirming exactly what you needed to know? And when someone does come back after you've gone silent, it's not because you pushed harder. It's because you stopped pushing altogether. That silence said something words never could. It said, if you want me, you know where to find me, but I'm not going to beg you to notice me. And the ones who are meant for you, they hear that message loud and clear. They come back, not out of guilt or habit, but because they choose to. Because your silence reminded them of your worth. Because the quiet shouted the truth, that you're not someone who settles for crumbs when you know you deserve a seat at the table. So next time you feel the urge to break the silence just to keep things going, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it's being reciprocated? Or am I doing this because I'm afraid of what happens if I stop? If it's the second one, don't send that message. Let the silence say it for you. Because silence isn't weakness. It's strength dressed in stillness. It's self-worth with the volume turned all the way down. But the message couldn't be louder. And that's why you're about to hear from him. Silence did this. When you stop talking, something powerful happens. You finally start listening. And I don't mean listening to words. I mean listening to actions, to energy, to effort. You stop being distracted by the noise, the excuse. And in that silence, things become clearer than ever before. You know, when you're always filling the space, always sending the text, always initiating the plan, always trying to keep the spark alive, you drown out what's really happening. You override your own instincts. You ignore how someone's making you feel because you're too focused on keeping them instead of watching is them. Silence changes that. It forces you to observe, to notice whether someone is actually investing in you or just responding when it's convenient. It's easy to miss the signs when we're emotionally involved. When we like someone, we want things to work so badly that we convince ourselves the little they give is enough, that their occasional effort is a sign they care. But when you stop pushing the conversation forward, when you stop being the glue, you get to see what they're really made of. Does the relationship breathe without your oxygen? Do they reach out when you go quiet? Do they show up when you're not reminding them? Because here's the truth. Silence is a test that reveals everything. It's not about playing games. It's not about pretending not to care. It's about stepping back long enough to see if they step forward. That's how you learn whether their interest was genuine or just a response to your availability. We get caught in this trap where we feel like if we don't speak up, they'll forget us. That if we don't keep engaging, they'll just move on. And honestly, sometimes they do. But that's not a loss. That's clarity. Because someone who's genuinely interested doesn't just disappear when you go quiet. They reach out, they ask where you've been, they make the effort to reconnect. Silence is where self-respect lives. It's where your standards start to speak for you. It's you saying, if you want access to me, show me why you deserve it. It's you choosing not to chase, not to beg, not to convince. And that decision alone changes everything. Because the moment you stop being afraid to lose someone is the moment you gain your power back. It's uncomfortable at first. Let's be honest about that. Silence can feel like rejection. It can feel like punishment. You want to send that message. You want to reach out. You want to close the gap. But every time you resist the urge, you're training yourself to trust your value, even when there's no external validation coming your way. You're rewiring your self-worth to be internal, not dependent on someone else's attention. And then something incredible happens. You stop wondering where you stand because their actions answer that question for you. You stop needing constant reassurance because you've seen the truth in their behavior. You stop investing in uncertainty because you've proven to yourself that your peace is worth more than their potential. That's when you get to decide, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of clarity. Do you still want this person? Do they meet you at the level you deserve? Are they consistent when you're not carrying the emotional weight for both of you? If the answer is yes, then beautiful. Build something real from there. But if the answer is no, if the silence reveals more absence than effort, then you know it wasn't meant for you. And you don't have to keep forcing something that was never mutual. The best part? You didn't have to yell. You didn't have to beg. You didn't have to explain your worth in a 2mm text. You just stepped back, and that silence, it did the talking for you. Let the silence, when you're always the one initiating, always the one sending the good morning text, the funny meme, the just checking in message, you're unknowingly setting a rhythm. You're holding up the entire interaction. You're the engine keeping the thing alive. And here's the truth, most people don't want to hear. The person on the other side gets used to it. They start expecting it. Not because they're a bad person, but because you're making it easy for them not to try. But what happens when you stop, when you step back, when you go quiet? Suddenly, there's a shift. There's a break in the pattern. And that break does something very powerful. It disrupts the dynamic. Because when someone gets used to you doing all the work, your silence isn't just quiet, it's loud. It's unfamiliar. And unfamiliar gets noticed. People often think that silence is passive, that it's weakness, that if you care, you should speak up, reach out, keep the energy going. But sometimes silence is the strongest move you can make. Not out of spite, not to manipulate, but to reset the imbalance that was slowly draining your value in their eyes. You see, relationships are dances. There's a rhythm, a give and take. And if one person keeps stepping forward while the other just sways in place, the dance falls apart. Silence is your way of stepping back. And the moment you do, the other person has to make a decision. Do they step forward to meet you, or do they let you drift? And let me tell you, that decision reveals everything. People who are genuinely interested, who value you, they will feel your absence. They'll notice the shift. And if you matter to them, they'll respond. Not always with a grand gesture, but with presence, with effort, with movement. They'll say, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while, or I was thinking about you. That's them adjusting to the silence, trying to close the space you created. But others, they won't move. They'll stay still. Not because they never liked you, but because they were never invested enough to chase. And that silence you gave them, it didn't create a void. It simply revealed the truth that without your effort, there was nothing left. It's a confronting realization because silence doesn't always bring people back, but it always brings you clarity. You don't want to be in a connection where your value is only recognized when you're constantly proving it, when you're constantly initiating. You become someone who's always available, always reachable, always there. But silence changes that image. It reframes you in their mind. It says, I'm not a given, I'm not a convenience, I'm a person with standards. And I'm not afraid to lose someone who isn't showing up. That's where the power shift happens. Because when you stop trying to fill every silence, when you stop overcompensating for their lack of effort, you create a gap. And in that gap, they're left with a choice. Do I step up or do I let this go? And if they choose to let it go, good. Because now you're no longer clinging to a version of the relationship that only existed because you were holding it together. Now you're standing in truth. Now you're free to be pursued instead of always pursuing. And if they choose to step up, now it's real. Now it's mutual. But that shift only happens when you're willing to do nothing, to hold back, to resist the urge to break the silence just to feel something again. That's when most people cave. They feel the discomfort of the quiet and they rush back in to fill it, to reinitiate, to make it okay again. But what if you didn't? What if, for once, you let someone miss you? Let them feel your absence long enough to realize what it feels like when you're not there, not in a cruel way, not as punishment, but because your presence is a privilege, not a promise. You're not someone they get to keep without effort. When you step back, you're not saying, I don't care. You're saying, I've cared enough. Now it's your move. And that moment, that pause, that silence, it reveals everything you need to know. Because if someone truly sees your value, they won't let the silence last. They'll break it. They'll reach out. And when they do, it won't be because you pushed them to. It'll be because they wanted to. That's the difference between being chosen and being convenient. Let them miss you. Let the silence speak. Let your absence remind them of your presence. If you've ever felt like you're the one constantly giving, constantly reaching out, constantly trying to fix or figure out where you stand with someone, then let me tell you something. Silence might just be the most powerful thing you've never tried. Not silence as punishment, not silence to manipulate. I'm talking about silence as self-respect, the kind that reclaims your energy, resets the emotional dynamic, and forces both people to see the truth a little more clearly. Because here's what happens when you stay in constant motion towards someone who's uncertain about you. You become the emotional engine of the relationship. You're the one keeping the car moving while they're sitting in the passenger seat, deciding whether or not they even want to stay on the ride. That's exhausting. That's draining. And it keeps you stuck in this loop where you begin to mistake effort for connection. You start confusing the fact that you're putting in the work with the idea that it's working. And that is a dangerous place to be. Silence breaks that cycle. It halts the pattern where you're always showing up, always reaching out, always available. Because, let's be honest, that kind of energy can start to look like desperation, even if it's coming from a place of genuine care. And the truth is, when someone doesn't feel the risk of losing you, they don't really feel the need to step up. There's no urgency, no motivation to appreciate you now because your presence feels guaranteed. You're there every time. On the other end of the message, reacting, waiting, hoping. But silence interrupts that story. Suddenly, you're not reacting anymore. You're not there to fill the silence with reassurance or convenience. You're not smoothing things over. And that absence, that pause, it says something. It gives the other person the opportunity to ask themselves, wait, where did she go? Why hasn't she called? Why do I feel this shift? And that moment, that realization, is when the dynamic starts to change. You see, most people don't notice what they have when it's right in front of them all the time. It's human nature. We're clamored to things we think will always be there. But silence removes the comfort of your constant presence. It creates space for longing, for curiosity, for realization. And maybe for the first time, they have to face the question you've been asking yourself all along. Do I really want this? Am I willing to show up? And here's what's beautiful about this. If they step up, it's real. It's not because you nudged them or guilted them or stayed on the hamster wheel hoping they'd finally see you. It's because your absence gave them the contrast they needed to finally see your value. And if they don't step up, that silence told you something just as valuable. They were never going to. You just saved yourself more months or even years of emotional limbo. Let's be really clear about something though. Silence isn't easy, especially when you've been conditioned to think that being quiet means being forgotten. That if you don't chase, you'll be abandoned. That if you stop reaching out, they'll just move on. But here's the thing, if silence makes them move on, they were already halfway out the door. They just hadn't told you yet. And isn't it better to know that now rather than keeping yourself emotionally available to someone who isn't emotionally invested? Choosing silence is an act of courage. It's not cold. It's not passive. It's intentional. It says, I refuse to keep pouring into something that isn't pouring back. And you might be surprised What happens when you stop trying so hard to be heard and just listen to their actions, to your own feelings, to the space between you? Sometimes the most powerful message you can send is no message at all, because it makes them realize just how much of a presence you actually were in their life. The jokes, the care, the check-ins, the emotional support, all of it was you. And when you pull that back, it creates an echo, a silence that's not empty, but full of everything you used to bring. So if you're wondering whether stepping back will make him miss you, whether he'll come back or finally start trying, don't ask yourself that. Ask yourself, what has chasing got me so far? Has it brought me closer to clarity? Or has it just kept me busy while going nowhere? Because I promise you, when you stop trying to prove your worth and instead let someone experience the absence of your presence, that's when the truth reveals itself. He's coming back, not because you chased, but because you didn't. He's coming back, not because you chased, but because you didn't. This is the moment most people underestimate. They think silence is a tactic, a trick to get someone's attention. But it's not about playing games. It's about finally choosing yourself. There comes a point when you realize that constantly explaining your worth to someone who doesn't see it isn't love, it's desperation in disguise. And the moment you step away, not out of anger, not to punish them, but out of a quiet decision to protect your peace, that's when everything changes. Because here's the truth. People, you notice absence far more than presence, as long as you're always there, replying quickly, sending that good morning text, checking in when they go quiet. They feel no urgency. You're a given, a constant. Something they've come to expect without having to earn. But when you pull your energy back, when your phone goes quiet, when they wake up and don't see your name lighting up their screen, that's when they feel something they haven't in a long time. The risk of losing you, and it's not that they didn't like you, they probably did, but you were always there, always available. And availability without scarcity breeds indifference. The moment you become silent, not in a cold, dramatic way, but in that grounded, graceful way that says, I've said what I needed to say, and now I'm done. They start to feel your value in a way words never could. Because silence is powerful. It's not a void, it's a mirror. It reflects back to them what their effort truly was. It forces them to sit with their own actions, or lack of them. And maybe for the first time, they're not being distracted by your words or reassured by your constant validation. They're just left with themselves. And when someone starts missing you, not because you reminded them to, but because they genuinely felt your absence, that's when it's real. Sometimes the loudest message you can send is no message at all. You're not ignoring, you're observing. You're not ghosting, you're growing. And when someone circles back, when that message finally comes through, it's not because you begged for it, it's because they realized they lost something that wasn't going to stick around forever, waiting to be chosen. But here's the beautiful part. By the time they do reach out, you may no longer want what you used to beg for. You might have healed. You might have grown. Silence doesn't just teach them something, it teaches you. It shows you what happens when you stop forcing something and just allow the truth to rise to the surface. And let's be honest, the right person won't need silence to realize your worth. But the wrong one, the unsure one, the one who took your presence for granted, sometimes silence is the only language they'll understand. You don't need to post a quote. You don't need to prove how strong you're being. You just go quiet, not in bitterness, but in peace. You shift your focus. You pour back into yourself. You get back to your life. And when he notices, when he reaches out, when he says, hey, I've been thinking about you. That didn't happen because you reminded him every day. It didn't happen because you stayed available just in case he changed his mind. It happened because you finally stopped chasing someone who needed to feel what life was like without you. So no, he's not coming back because you texted him the perfect line. He's not coming back because you proved your worth. He's coming back because your silence forced him to sit in the discomfort of his own indecision. And in that space, he had to ask himself, what if she's actually gone? And that question is the turning point. Let them wonder. Let them miss you. Let them feel what they didn't appreciate when they had it. That's not punishment, that's power.